Rabbi Isai, welcome back to Yerushalmi Maaser Sheni. We're talking about how we look at a redemption figure for a Maaser Sheni fruit when the price changes from place to place and they've been moved from one place to another one. So, you're taking Maaser Sheni fruit from an expensive place to a cheap place. This is Lamed Gimel Lamed Aleph, yeah? Cheap place, to expensive place. You redeem it based on the price in that place, the place where they are now. Maybe Paris bin Agoren La'ir, you're bringing Paris fruit of Maaser Sheni from the area of threshing to the city, or Kada Yayin, jugs of Maaser Sheni min Agas from the vat, La'ir to the town, and that adds up a bit on the value. Hashevach, the increase in value, goes to Maaser Sheni. B'yitzia, with the expenses of the logistics, B'beisa, he has to pay from his own accord. Now, we have learned the value of redemption of Maaser Sheni is based on where the fruit is. But even in other places, let's say, there are different prices sometimes. Sometimes in one place you might have different prices. So the Mishnah is going to explain now what price do we use? So, Potin Maaser Sheni b'shar hazol. You redeem Maaser Sheni based on the cheapest price in that place. So you treat the price that you're redeeming like the sort of the wholesaler takes the fruit from the owner of the field, he buys it cheap, but not like he sells it to the purchasers, where he sells it at a more expensive rate and earns the difference between the two. And you can redeem prutas of Maaser Sheni on a coin of chulin, just like the money changer swaps his seller for prutas that he takes from someone else. That he treats prutas as being cheap, and he takes a lot of prutas for his seller. But not like someone who is adding prutas of his own and giving them for a seller of someone else, because then you treat the prutas more expensive and you give less prutas for one seller. So in other words, if you've got, let's say, coins of pruta that you put Maaser Sheni on it, now you want to redeem it onto a seller of chulin, you're allowed to be lenient and treat the prutas as cheap and be mechalel a lot of prutas on the seller based on the price that the money changer treats it when he takes prutas and gives you a seller, but not based on the expensive price that the money changer treats it when he's giving prutas out for the seller that's given to him. You understand? So it's based on the money changer's rate and not based on the purchaser's rate. Right. Ein poitin Maaser Sheni afsara. We do not work out Maaser Sheni value based on a sort of estimation, but you have to try and work out to be as exact as you can. And based on that, whatever was fixed, whatever it is, that sort of price. If we know the value in the market, then you can rely on one merchant to give you the value. But if we don't know the value in the market, then you get three merchants. For example, the wine which is sort of fermenting a bit, or fruit that's rotting, or the coins that are rusting. They don't have a fixed price in the market because it depends on how bad it is. Okay. We said, Hamalech Peres Maaser Sheni, you redeem it at the gate of that place. They said, you're taking Maaser Sheni from expensive to cheap after you've done that. But in the beginning, also, you shouldn't take it there because by taking it to a cheap place, you're causing a loss to Maaser Sheni. Over Peres Maaser Sheni, but with fruits of Maaser Sheni, this is only with fruits themselves. So that's fruit where you've not yet separated Maaser Sheni. You're allowed to take normal fruit, which is tevel, to a cheap place, as long as the fruit is tevel and there's no designated Maaser Sheni. Then we've not yet fixed the place of Maaser Sheni. So taking the fruit to a cheap place is not considered a reduction in the value of redemption for Maaser Sheni. Kahada, as we see for the following story. Rabbi Hamalei Perinacha, he had fruit of tevel in his own town, or Perin Bekusnayin, and he had similar tevel in Kosnayin, where the fruit was even cheaper. B'Abakava Masra Dahacha, he separated Maaser Sheni on the fruit here, Tamon, by giving it a name Maaser on the fruit which was there in Kuznin, because Kuznin was a cheaper place. Over Farikline, after that, he redeemed the Maaser Sheni that he'd separated, B'Shara de Tamon, based on the price there. You see from this story that you're allowed to move Tevel from one place to another if you can be Masakin Tevel, which is remaining in an expensive place, by being separating Maaser Sheni in a cheap place, which is what Rebbe did. Then obviously you're allowed to move the Tevel itself into the cheap place and to separate Mimachala Maaser Sheni over there. Okay? Now Maaser Sheni can be redeemed B'Shah Hazol, the cheapest place that you can reach in his place. The Gemara brings a brisa. Tani, we've learned in the brisa, Bein, B'Yoike, whether its fruit of Maaser Sheni was expensive and then Huzli became cheap. Bein Bazal, it was cheap, or Hukru became expensive. It's always redeemed based on the cheap price. Now, Nicha, I understand, but Yoke Huzli, it was expensive, it became cheap. So now the price is cheap. So you redeem it based on now. But what about Bazul, the Hukru, it was cheap and became expensive? Why do we make the price based on an earlier price? Surely it should be based on the value now. So Shani here is different. Basically, you can cheat with the Maaser Sheni, and you can exempt yourself from adding a chomesh, from adding a fifth. If you do the redemption through someone else, you can exempt yourself from adding the fifth. Right? So if you're not using that, it's as if you're willingly adding a fifth onto the value. So we allow you, therefore, to do an estimation of the fruit based on the cheap price, earlier cheap price, because by adding a fifth, you're going to make up any loss that comes about by doing it at the cheap price. So we don't expect the expensive price to be any more than 20% more than the cheap price. So by cheap price and adding 20%, you're going to cover the expensive price as well. Okay? Now, after we learned our Mishnah, fruit moved from expensive to cheap, or from cheap to expensive. You look at the value where they are. Maaser Sheni of Demai were even more lenient. Study we learned. When do we say they've been separated from Vadai? Maaser Sheni separated from Vadai. Aval, if it's separated from Demai, Bein B'Yoike, whether it's a case where they were in an expensive place and then brought to a cheap place, so Huzlu, so the fruit is now cheap. Bein B'Zol, or it was beginning, earlier on it was in a cheap place and then moved to an expensive place. So Hukru, so the fruits are now more expensive. Ma'echrai, you can redeem it B'Zol with the cheap price. You can sell it back, you can redeem it with the cheap price. Because since the whole chiyuv to be meistering demai is only rabbinical, they're lenient that you can redeem it based on the cheap price of the earlier place. Lama, why are they lenient with demai to redeem it based on the cheap price of the earlier place? Mishum Shenira. Now, is it because, look, this was fitting before the Machir Bazol, could be sold cheap earlier on. Therefore, we're lenient that you can still do it based on that price. I Mishum, or maybe even now you can take it back to that place. So since you can still take it back, we say it's as if it's still there now. Therefore, you can look at the cheap price, which applies in that place. What's the difference between them? Hooray, the difference is, if the first place, the fruit went up again. You hear that? It was cheap. Then in the first place, it's gone up. So in Tebe, you're going to tell me, you can be Mechalal Mishum, Shuhu, Yochel Azulako, you can take it back there now. Well, that doesn't help here because it's gone up in price over there now. Hooray, Hakiru has gone up in price. In Tebe, you're going to say the reason is Mishum Shanira, Li Macha, Bezol, right? Well, it was fitting then to be sold for cheap. I feel okay, then even now that the first place has become expensive, that leniency will still apply, because whatever happens, even in this situation, is the reason that Nira Li Macha Bezol. Right? It's like fitting, it was fitting to be sold for cheap. So even now, even though it was fitting then, but that might still help. The kula will still be there. Right? They were fitting at one point to be sold for cheap. Now, the Gemara brings another thing to be lenient. Now, the fruit, as long as they were fitting to be sold for cheap, and we bring a story. He was in Rome. he saw they were redeeming Ile Niklusia, these dates of Niklusia. Right, where could that be? Niklusia, is that in Cyprus somewhere? What's their name? Nicholas or something? Whatever.
It's just a valuable date.
Yeah, it's Nicholas from Damascus. A person, okay. It's not Nicosia or anything like that. Anyway, Ile Nicosia. So these dates. Now, there were Maaser Sheni separated from Demai, Dahacha, who came from Eretz Yisrael, and they were redeeming them Taman over there in Rome, Keshara Dahacha, like the cheap price of Eretz Yisrael, even though in Rome they were more expensive. Amar Man Daharulon said, who possibly can be lenient in this case? Chilfei Bar Kirvaya Irulon. He was the one, Chilfei was the one who gave them the sack. And these people redeemed Maaser Sheni of Demai based on the cheap price of the earlier place, even though it could be the price has gone up in the interim. And you see from here, the Chilfei's psak was to rely on the fact that earlier on they could have been sold cheaply, without thinking now if the price is still around or not. Okay, now what we've said is, if you've got silver or gold of Maaser Sheni, you should take it to Yerushalmi and convert it into prutas and buy food. Now, what about you're taking dinrim of Maaser Sheni to Yerushalmi, and you're going to a place where the prutas are very cheap, more than Yerushalmi. So you want to separate your dinrim now in that place to get more prutas for your dinar. Okay, Tani related to the price. You're going on the way to Yerushalmi where the prutas are cheaper. Mistakehu adam ad shekel. You're allowed to earn or gain a bonus until a shekel by selling a dinar of Maaser Sheni in that place, and you'll get prutas for a shekel more than the prutas you should have received in Yerushalmi. So you can make a shekel's profit. And some say that in this case, mistakehu adam ad revius, you can earn until a quarter of the difference between the prutas in that place and the value of the prutas in Yerushalmi. So you can make a quarter profit. So the first one said a shekel, which is half a dinar, right? And the other one says a quarter. Now, you can't put dinner in on prutas unless you're in Yerushalmi. So here you want to sell your dinner in outside Yerushalmi. So you have to make a condition with the buyer. He shouldn't give you the prutas until you come to Yerushalmi. And then you'll give him the dinner. So how do you do this in practical? Let's see. Hey Chavida. So what happens? Dinar hacha, a dinar in Yerushalmi, you can swap it for betrain alfin, 2,000 prutas. Over Arbel, in Arbel, a city in Hoshea, it's referred to there. You can swap it betrain alfin velokon, 2,000 prutas, and a lokon. A lokon is a coin worth 32 prutas. So instead of getting 2,000, you get 2,032. Now imagine you have 250 dinarim of Maaser Sheni. So 250 times 32, and he offers, in Arbel, you will get 508,000 prutas. 250 times 2032. In Yerushalmi, you will get 250 times 2,000, which is 500,000. So in Arbel, you'll gain 8,000 prutas. Now, the owners sell the dinner in Arbel to the buyer. So he has to give them 500,000 prutas taken to Yerushalmi, and to be mechalel the dinner which are remaining in Arbel on the 500,000 prutas. The chilul is Yerushalmi. You mechalel the dinner in 500,000 prutas based on Jerusalem price. Now the lekeach merited with his dinner already in Arbel, he has to pay to the seller based on the Arbel price, which is 508,000. But the buyer went to bring the prutas to Yerushalmi himself. So for all the bother of him bringing the coins to Yerushalmi, instead of giving an extra 8,000 prutas, he's going to reduce it by maybe around 6,000 prutas for his bother. And it ends up, the buyer gives the seller here in Yerushalmi betrain alfin 502,000. Hear that? He won't get the 508 because of the logistics to bring all the coins down to Yerushalmi. He will get 502,000. The seller has therefore earned for himself 2,000 prutas, which is a quarter of the difference between the 508,000 and the 500,000. You follow? So he'll earn around 2,000 prutas because of this transaction.
6,000.
Huh?
6,000.
No, he's going to charge. The guy's charging him
2,000.
6,000 to bring them down to Yerushalmi.
Mm-hmm.
So he made an extra 8, but he has to pay out 6. So he ends up with 2,000 extra, right? 500,000 and 2,000. 502,000. Okay. The extra 2,000 is not Maaser Sheni. It's money that the seller earned for himself as a result of the whole transaction. As far as Chilul Maaser, the 500,000 prutas is enough. Tani, we learned at the price. When you want to start redeeming your fruit, and you're bringing it before the Sochrim in order to work out a value, don't tell them that the Paris is Maaser Sheni. Don't say that. Ella, you want to work out the value of the Shem Chulin, you should work out the value when it's in Chulin stage. So what's he saying? Don't tell them it's Maaser Sheni. Tell them, imagine this is Chulin, tell me the value. Rabbi Shalboy, he says, I got it. He says, wait a minute. What about Shaya Kol Yadim by Shulshin? What if everyone knows it's Maaser Sheni? You still shouldn't mention it. He says, I feel okay, and even so, you have to treat it as if the fruit is Chulin, because the Chachamim made no distinction between cases when they made their gezeras. You still have to say this is Chulin. Okay. Now, another din of redemption of Maaser Sheni, which is done with other paras. Tani, we learned in a brisa, Ein Paidin Maaser Sheni, you can only redeem fruit of Maaser Sheni on other fruit at a b'min al mina when it's the same type. But you can't be mechal on fruit of Maaser on paras Chulin of another type. Deloike, if a brisa didn't tell me this, man on mina, what would we have said? Paidin min achitin al asayrin, you can redeem from wheat to barley, min asayrin al chitin, barley to wheat. That clearly is no good. What chiddush is the brisa telling us? She says, Lachain Sricha. You know what he's talking about? To tell you, you can't redeem Afila Mina Igru, which is white wheat, and Hashamtis for red wheat. And Mina Hashamtis red wheat, and Igru on white wheat. As far as Chilul Maaser Sheni, they're considered two separate types. Rav Chananya said, now, we're talking here about how do you fix the price of Maaser Sheni when some of it is holy. So he would take the early ripening cucumbers as a gift, lemalchus, for the king. He would take the Maaser Sheni of each one of them on a part which is kolaikas next to the stems of these fruits, a part near the stem. And after that, he would redeem those bits onto Maaser Sheni. He would redeem the bits of Maaser Sheni, and Ra'asan, he treated those bits separated as Maaser Sheni as if they were separate from the rest of the cucumber. And as a result, he gave it a very small value based on the value of a cut-up fruit. Now, Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi said, I don't understand. Shalemus, the truth is, these cucumbers are complete. You've given it Maaser Sheni on a tiny bit of it, but it's a whole cucumber. But you want to tell me we value it as chatuchas if it's cut up? So I don't agree. You should value them as they're complete. And the pidyon will be based on the Maaser Sheni aspect in every cucumber, which is like a tenth of it. Rabbi Yochanan said, V'yos. And this Taina of Rabbi Yochanan is correct. Because imagine you had Shnayim Shei Shutvin Mekishus Achas. Two people are partners in one cucumber. One has 1 share and one has 9 shares. Shema, do you think the one who's got the 9 can break up the partnership? Omer can tell his friend, come, we'll divide it up. You take your bit, I'll take my bit. You can't do that. The second one can say, by cutting it up before we sell it, the value will go down. Ella, you should leave the whole one, through both of them together, Nimkai can be sold B'Yoka for a more expensive price. So here as well, when you're fixing a tenth of it as Maaser Sheni, you haven't got the right to start cutting this part up and treat it as a separate entity. Because by both of them together as a whole fruit, Nimka B'Yoka can be sold for a more expensive price. So since you can't cut it before the redemption of Maaser Sheni, definitely you cannot be Marich L'Chelek as if it's cut up, and that's not like the view of Rebbe. Okay, Kada, and we bring a story to prove this. Rashim Berebi, Havim Mefaked, he paskin al Inen Zeramaya, those in the south. Zavim Mezazinba, they were ruining, they were cheapening the value of Maaser Sheni. They were fixing it with small parts of the fruit. They would cut up these parts, redeem it when they cut up. And Rashim Berebi held, this meaning is wrong, because you're ruining the price of the mechir. Therefore, he passed it to Bar Kapara to tell them off. Nasta Bar Kapara took the fruit, but he cut it in front of them into tiny bits. And after that, Amar, he said, Tavu Klum, is this any good for selling? I mean, it's obviously these tiny bits are not worth anything. And then similarly, even if you're cutting it up from the fruit, the master from the fruit, you're causing it to lose its value. Therefore, you shouldn't follow what they used to do. Now, the issue to cut up the fruit before you redeem it belongs to all types of fruit. Ad Kadun, so it's all very well we know the issue to cut up Maaser Sheni for redemption is B'mila Mekatata, with something which, look, when you cut it into bits, it's not as good as it was before. But what about Mila Mekatata? What about something which you can cut, the tava, and it's still good? Fruit from this type, maybe you can cut the Maaser Sheni before the redemption, right? Because the fruit doesn't ruin so much. Very good question. We have no answer. Shebel Levi Amar, he said, "Ein paytin Maaser Sheni. You cannot redeem Maaser Sheni fruit less than their value, unless the difference is ad shloshim b'shisha b'shvai. Unless the difference is until 1 in 36 of its value. So it's a minute difference. It says here, to Maaser Sheni, which is 36 prutas, you can't redeem it for 35. But if you got Maaser Sheni worth 37, you can redeem it for 36. Okay. The wording of 36 prutas is hinted at in the pasuk. There's a Sarta HaKesef B'Yadecha. B'Yadecha is Gematria 36. The amount's still 36 prutas you have to bring to Yerushalmi. You can't reduce the value of the redemption. Okay? Amar Rav Chizkiah. And Rav Chizkiah said, Zeshu Mechalal. If you're Mechalal Maaser Sheni, Lo Yeh Mechalal Al Chatzi Pruta. Don't be mechalal on a coin which is worth half a pruta. It shouldn't be like on a coin which is not a usable coin. Ella, the coin's got to be a value at shara pruta. It's got to be at least a pruta's worth. So we said you redeem Maaser Sheni at the cheap price, which is the price of the person who buys it from the owner of the field, but not the price that he's selling it to the purchasers. Kama. Alal Kumei, many people went before Rabbi Yochanan, Rosh Lakish, to learn the right way to redeem Maaser Sheni. Be'in and Amre, they were telling them, Paik be'ishlam, go and pay and redeem, Kahadein Tanaya, like the Tana the Brisa. Paidin Maaser Sheni, you have to redeem Maaser Sheni, Kavshasazol, when you can buy it in that cheap place. Below the Shasa Yoka, not based on the expensive place. So right after the owner of the fields already sold all their fruit, and now you can hardly get anything. You have to go to these shopkeepers who sell it more expensive. So now you're not going to get the cheap price, therefore you have to redeem it based on the expensive price. That's why we tell you to do it earlier. Yeah? Okay. We also said in our Mishnah, you can pay the Maaser Sheni b'Sharazol, that's the gate, like the person who buys it from the fields, but not like he sells it. And like the money changer, what he does with his prutas that he takes, he considers the prutas to be cheap. But not like the person who's paying the money changer, where he has to pay a lot of prutas, right? He treats prutas as being expensive. Now, Ad Kadun, it's all very well if we know that you can value Dava Maruba, a big amount of fruit or coins based on the cheap price. But Hayadava more, it's only a small amount of Maaser Sheni that someone wants to redeem. You have to be lenient for this. What do we say then? He says it could be they only allowed you to be Maaser Sheni according to the cheap price when it's a big amount, because it's not so noticeable that you're being makel in the valuation. But if it's a small bit of fruit, then any difference in mechir, everyone can see it. It looks like we're being lenient with Pidyon Maaser Sheni. It could be they didn't allow you to be mechalel worse than that price. So my answer is afilu kain, even so, small amounts of Maaser Sheni, like the person, the shopkeeper takes the fruits, like not like he sells it to everyone else. And it's based on the price, like the Shulchani gives out his seller for prutas, where he takes for like and not like the person who's gathering himself for the seller of someone else. Okay? Now the Mishnah told us, as Shudamav you're doing, if we know the value of the market, then you need a valuation of one person. He would show a basket of dates of Maaser Sheni Lenagra to the person who made the baskets, who knew how to make them, to work out value. And he would work out the valuation based on him. Rabbi Yana Machve, he would show his vessel of Roiva, quarter cup of chitin, to the Maaser Sheni Lechitzunia, to the wheat merchant, to work out the value. Redeem it based on his value. Rav Simon, Chave Perin, he showed fruits of Maaser Sheni they redeemed. Rav Chilkiah was Boki in the prices. Amalei, he says, did I redeem it? Rav Shavien, Amalei Kain, he says, yes, you did. Now we bring a din. Which person should value the fruit? You cannot use people who have no idea. He showed fruits of Maaser Sheni which you redeemed legoraisa, to one who was Gores Grisin. Gores Grisin, they translate it, makes beans and things. Pulling beans and things. Amalei says, Keshavian, did I redeem it right? Amalei says, look, don't ask me. Don't ask people who are fools. And since I'm not Boki, I'm a fool, I really can't answer you. Now, other examples of cheap prices that you can value Maaser Sheni for the redemption. You can look at the price, like the lower price that a person wants when he has grapes to sell, but Tahara, B'Tekufas Tammuz, in like the late afternoon of summer where it's very hot. Basa Balade, after you just come out of the bathhouse, you're very hot because of the heat. Masechet the Zuraya, when you buy these grapes, you'll need to take them to the vat. No one's going to agree to buy these grapes and schlep them all the way to the vat in this heat, right? Unless they give him a really cheap price. And at that time, when it's a really cheap price, my entire printed, you're allowed to bring your prutas or mifrakine and to redeem the Maaser Sheni with that price. Another example of a low price we can use for pidyon of Maaser Sheni. We look at the price of Maaser Sheni, Kama Banash Boy, like the low price that a person wants Ba'arufta on an Erev Shabbos, B'Psei Ramosha, like close to sunset, right? Stuff left in the market close to sunset on a Friday, you'll take whatever you get for it. Minashaya Kalan, the women who are weaving their hairs for the sake of Shabbos, Umavi Alein, and you bring the fruits on their face in order for them to buy. And at that time, it's going to be a very low price. Because at that time, so late, no one's going to buy unless you really make it cheap. In that situation, you can bring coins and redeem the Maaser Sheni based on that price. He would leave pairs of Maaser Sheni until they would really sort of wither and go down in their value. And more than that, he would redeem the Motzi Shabbos when the price was still normally cheaper than the rest of the week. He had oil of Maaser Sheni, he brought it to Akko. He says, if that good oil, the Beis Marko came is still around in the market, now's the best time for you to nifrakine, to redeem your oil, because now you can redeem it at a low price. The light have shita mine, because now there's no value, even 1/6 of the oil of the good oil. So now it's a special cheap price. Now is the time to do it. Now, if you don't know the value, then you have to use the valuation of 3 people. Then paid in Maaser Sheni, you can redeem Maaser Sheni, which you don't know the value. 3 merchants who are knowing, who are aware of the value. And even Echamen Go, once again, Echamen Baal, one is the owner of the fruit himself. Now, what does he mean here? Where out of the 3 merchants, one was a guy and one was the owner. Rabbi Yonah boy. One thing's clear. Shneim goyim, if 2 are goyim, no, they can't look at the valuation. Shneim baalim, if 2 are owners, then lie. No, also not fitting. So we're only in a situation where one is a guy, but echad baal, lie. Also not fitting. Ella, he says, what Sha'ar Rabbi Yochanan is Dodin Imrat. It basically has two different colours. So one of the three can be a guy, or one of the three can be an owner. But you can't have a guy and an owner in the three. Okay? Right. Stop here. Well, carry on. So now in our cases, well, let's say a balabais and someone else wants to redeem Maaser, so who comes first? So balabais has separated Maaser Sheni from his fruit. He says, I want to redeem it Besela. And someone else wants to redeem it Besela. Well, then balabais Cohen, the balabais comes first. He has to add a fifth. When he redeems his Maaser Sheni, he has to add a fifth. Now in balabais Besela, if balabais says Sela, once it's Sela ve'isa, right? You're like adding on to the value. Some say you can't redeem Maaser Sheni more than the value. So some say it's talking about a case where the fruit hasn't got a true value, and therefore you can add a bit on. All right. So one says a seller, one says seller ve'isa. Eshel seller ve'isa kaidem. Then we go to the one who's offering the seller and the isa. Neshu moisiv ala keren. He's adding on the principal. The truth is, what the owner will give is more than what the other guy is giving. The owner's adding a fifth, which is another dinar. The second one is only adding an issa, which is 1 in 24 of a dinar. You hear that? One's adding 20%, one's adding 4%. But we still give it to the one who's adding the 4%. The Mishnah says the second guy comes first. He's giving a higher principal for the keren. Yeah? And it sounds like, and he comes first in such a case. Now, when is the person an owner as far as the chiyuv of adding a fifth? You redeem your Maaser Sheni, you add a fifth. Whether the fruit is yours, or is given to you as a gift. Now, if the owner and someone else are suggesting a seller for the pidyon, the owner comes first because they add a fifth. But if the second one had a higher suggestion, even by one Issa, then he comes first. Now, wait a minute. Surely the fifth that the owner adds is Merubal to Safta more than the 4% that the other one's adding. The 20% will add a lot to a dinar, which is worth 24 Isurim. So why does the Mishnah say we should give it to the second person? This is different, adding a fifth of the owner from the amount that the second one's adding. The owners could anyway find a ruse, a trap over here with redeeming Maaser Sheni, or the patrim and achayim. She can get out of it without adding a fifth. He'll ask someone else to do the redemption. Therefore, it could be the owner won't bother adding a fifth. And at the end of the day, he won't pay more than a seller. Therefore, shall seller be'isa kaidam. We go to the one who's offered a seller in a bit, and there shall moisif al hakaren. He's adding on the principle. Yeah. Rabbi Yaakov Aridi, Shem Rosimai. Kol Maaser Sheni she'ein b'karnei shava pruta. If you've got Maaser Sheni where the keren, the principle is not a pruta, ein moisif chomish. You don't have to add a fifth when you come and redeem it. Rabbi Yosef Simon, Shem Rabbi Yochanan. Kol Maaser Sheni she'ein b'chumshe shava pruta. If you don't have a fifth where the chomish is a pruta, ein moisif chomish. You don't have to add a fifth. Now, first of all, ask Rav Simai. Hasi Rabbi Baba Mama. Ba'atinim, we've learned about this here. Chomesh pruta. There's 5 dinim with respect to a pruta, but not less than a pruta. Now, in this Nishesh, we could have added a 6th case of a pruta, right? Our data of Rav Simai, according to Rav Simai's view, according to him, there's another din that the Kadosh of Maaser Sheni, the keren, the principle of Maaser Sheni has to be at least a pruta, b'shav a pruta, so we should have added another din. So the Gemara answers, according to Rabbi Yochanan, here and elsewhere, we actually got another question. Mishnah could have added 2 more dinim, which is worth a pruta. And the Mishnah should have said, 7 dinim, which are shavul din with a pruta. According to Rabbi Yochanan. There's another 2 dinim. The first one is what Rabbi Yochanan said, V'chum sheshem Maaser Sheni, the 5th of Maaser Sheni has to be shav pruta. And V'oid, and the second din is min hadar from the following. Dom Rabbi Yosef Shem Rabbana, Ba'atam Rabbi Vav Shem Rabbi Yochanan, Ein karka nikneh, you cannot acquire land b'pachas b'shav pruta. So why does the Mishnah not mention these cases? Very good question, but I'm afraid the Gemara does not answer it. Now we bring another kula with redeeming a small amount of Maaser Sheni. Tanya will learn to the price. So when you've got Maaser Sheni, which is a small amount, She'ein dam of you doing, we don't really know the value exactly, but it's not more than 4 prutas. Daya, it's enough you take a seller, but you say hu v'chum shayit in its fifth. V'chul seller that will go on to this seller. Right, now what seller are we talking about? What's this special kula with Chilul Maaser Sheni in its fifth? Rabbi Yosef Shem Rav Crispa. You got that, Rabbi Crispa? And Rabbi Yosef Shem Zira. But seller Shem Maaser Sheni Masisa. We're talking about you mean Machalal, a small amount of Maaser, even on a seller of Maaser Sheni, which is a seller which you've already used for Maaser Sheni. Because there'll be a tiny bit of chulin in this coin. Definitely they didn't redeem the first time the whole value exactly. They would have done a bit less. You can't really be medaic when you're redeeming Maaser Sheni. So you'll use a coin which is worth a bigger value. There'll be a bit left. Therefore the brisa allows you to be mechalal with a small amount of Maaser on that tiny bit left in the seller, which remains chulin. Amar Rav Yochanan. Now actually what we brought is, what comes out is when you redeem Maaser Sheni on a coin which is worth more than Dmei Maaser, then the coin is not miskadesh unless only that value of Maaser begets holy, and anything rest remaining is chulin. So now there is a difference between Maaser Sheni pidyon and Hekdesh pidyon. Hekdesh shepedaya yosal damav. If when you redeem it more than the value which was holy, tafas as hakol, all the money takes over, the whole thing gets Kedushas Hekdesh. Yeah? Whereas Maaser Sheni Shebedaya, when you redeem more than its mount Yosal Darav of Maaser Sheni, light up as a call. We don't say the whole thing becomes Maaser Sheni. You know only its value. Whatever's left above that remains Cholin. And Mabein Hekdesh, Mabein Maaser Sheni. What's the difference between Hekdesh and Maaser Sheni in this matter? Rabbi, what's the reason for the difference? You'll always give a bit more redeeming Hekdesh. So we say your kavanah really is to make the whole the money holy, right? Even though it's worth more than the actual thing which is being redeemed. But when you're paid a Maaser Sheni, you don't want to give more than what's needed, right? You don't want to starting to bring it all to Shalim. Okay, I think we will stop here, Rabbi Sai. Is that okay?